All right, so throw up some thumbs if you were able to see my email about getting set up for the session today. I dropped the. I'm gonna drop the link. Okay, cool. Some people saw that email. Give me the shocked expression if you did not see the email. I want to make sure that everyone has time to get set up before we start getting the ball rolling. Okay, we got a shocked expression. Okay. So I just dropped a link to the box files into chat. Feel free to go to open that up. Go into the course materials folder. There should be a folder called part 2. I'm going to start sharing my screen and just kind of do a quick rundown as to how to quickly upload it into our Studio Cloud. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to point something out really quickly because a really good question was brought up between yesterday and today. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly before I upload part 2 information. So someone was running some code and was trying to run this chunk of code here, and was getting errors with the mutate function, some of the other functions in dplyr. I just wanted to point out that this is like a pedagogical example. So it's just an example of how the code can be written. And this isn't going to be a functional chunk of code because we never created a data frame called old data frame. But that said, in my example, I had a number of errors in that I had a capital S in select, a capital M in mutate, and a capital F in filter. And as we are all learning, R is very unhappy when it gets like even the slightest of typos, capitalization errors, everything is very case sensitive. So whenever you're writing these functions for dplyr after the library is installed and the library is loaded, be sure to make sure that the command is written in the correct syntax. And you can double check by looking in the help section to see how the command is supposed to be written. I just wanted to apologize for having some typos in my example. Okay, so that's that. I'm gonna upload part 2 for the session today. And then while I'm doing that, if anyone has questions or thoughts before we get started about the content that we went over yesterday, now is a really good time to ask any of those questions or share any of the reflections that you've had between yesterday and today. All right, so I'm going to download the materials. So here's the part 2 folder and course materials. Just going to download the whole thing. Saving it to my desktop. Save. It saves as a zip file. Show in Finder. So here's my zip file. And I'm going to go to my RStudio Cloud. So here we're in the project folder, and I'm going to click on the upload. So cloud, project, and upload. Choose the file. I'm going to take this part2.zip, open it. Okay. Then we can see that part 2 is uploaded now. Here. If you're uploading individual files, you're going to have to run through that step multiple times. You can still use this upload button, choose file, and you're going to go into the unzipped folder and then upload the individual files one by one. But if you upload the whole folder together, you can go into part 2 by clicking on it here. Remember, this is going into the working directory where all the content is that we're going to be working in. And then what I would do right off the bat is click on this little more gear and set this as my working directory. So once you have part 2 uploaded and you have set the part 2 folder as your working directory, throw up a thumbs up and we can move forward. So at this point, I'm gonna, okay, cool, wonderful, people are moving quick. So I'm gonna close my additional windows that I'm not working in, and then I'm gonna open up this part2.rmd document. So in our session today, so I'm just gonna show you what the final product of this. I went over this very quickly yesterday. Of the kind of final product, final goal of creating a reproducible report in our Markdown. I'm currently installing a package in order for this thing to function properly, I think. All right, we got, oh, there we go. Installing packages, knitting the document. So at the end of this session today, we will go over how to create this kind of HTML reproducible report, where we will create a report that has a combination of text or a combination of headings, text, the code, including all of our notes relating to that code, the plots that we create as part of this process. And at the end of the session today, after going through the rundown of our Markdown, we'll have a chance to do some of our own coding and our own visualizations in some breakout rooms. Okay, so our Markdown, so kind of like the highest level way of thinking about this is that, so our Markdown is a kind of a combination of formats. It primarily uses Markdown, which is like a type of encoding for like text encoding, and it kind of mixes in these like chunks of our code that allows like the code to run in a particular chunk while still being able to have like other text and content around the chunks of code. So at the top of, so if you were, I'll also say that almost all of the work that I do in R, if I'm taking up new projects or doing kind of other things for like research groups or like consultations that I have, I almost always create an R Markdown kind of project file where I do all of my work. So in order to create an R Markdown project file, or really an R source file or any R files that you're looking to do, there's this little like square with a plus symbol on it, a green plus symbol. I'm hovering over it with my mouse, and there's like a little arrow here. If you click on this plus, it'll show you the different things that you can create within RStudio. And in this case, we're going to be working in an R Markdown document, but I've already created one for everyone. But let's just take a quick look as to what some of the options are for R Markdown when you create this document. So R Markdown can create a variety of different types of documents. You can usually designate a title for the project, an author, generally yourself or whatever group that you're working with. And there are a number of like default output formats. And in this case, we're going to be working in HTML. But you can also create PDFs, or you can create Word documents. You can also, using our Markdown, create interactive HTML slides or PowerPoint slides. You can create kind of interactive graphics using Shiny documents. Our Markdown is like incredibly versatile. We're gonna go over really just the basics of creating our Markdown reports, but you know, as you advance in kind of any of the data science work that you do or any projects that you do in R, it's definitely worth it to look into some of these options because it's, I don't know, it creates some really useful, like directly from your code into like the reports that you want to share. And that way you don't have to like save all the files, like all the graphs, like, and move them into a document. It just takes it all and does it all in one step. So once you designate some of that stuff, you can hit OK, and it'll create the file in your working directory. When an R Markdown, actually, I'll just create an empty file to show what it looks like at the very beginning. I'm just going to title it example. Author is me. OK, we're going to hit OK. And you can see a new title or a new window open. They call it here Untitled 1 because the script itself hasn't been saved, but you can see that the example title that I indicated is shown here. The author is indicated here. The date is here, and the output that I selected is written here as HTML document. This little chunk right here at the top with these 3 dashes, this kind of metadata or the information about the R Markdown document closed with these 3 dashes. Kind of needs to be there in order for like RStudio and R to like recognize it as an R Markdown document. If this gets messed up, or if anything gets written above it, or or there's something that R Markdown does not recognize within these dashes, the R Markdown document like won't work properly. So that's just something to keep in mind kind of moving forward. So there's some examples. They kind of give you in the default setting a rundown of what things you can do in R Markdown. But let's go to part 2 and take a look at some of the examples that I have here. I've done a little bit of customizing of the settings here because I know that not only do I want an HTML document, but I also want a table of contents, and I want that table of contents to kind of like float around as you scroll through the document. So with a little bit more experience, you kind of learn some of the options that you can do with R Markdown. That said, there is an R Markdown cheat sheet of the variety of cheat sheets that we've talked about in previous sessions. There's an R Markdown cheat sheet that tells you a lot of like the kind of back end of how to modulate R Markdown stuff. Okay. Does anyone have questions with any of the stuff that I just talked about right now? If you're good to go, throw up a thumbs up. If you're still kind of like processing, but still like, I don't know, feeling all right, then throw up a shock symbol. Okay, processing. Okay. Okay, well, we'll take it slow. In terms of the coding content, we're not going to have like a ton of new stuff in this first hour. It's mostly going to be getting oriented with our Markdown documents. I'm going to take another moment to pause a little bit later for any additional questions that come up while you're processing. So you may remember that in the code that we wrote before, I'll just pull up, you don't have to do this, but I'll just pull up the part1.r document. We had all these like pound symbols with green text next to it. And remember that we kind of referred to well, these were the notes that I had written into the document. So these ones will not run as code. Now, R Markdown also uses that little pound hashtag symbol, but instead it uses it as like a heading designator. So for example, here, let's see if I still have that window open. No. For example, here, I can designate a heading, which now comes up in blue instead of green here because it's not code, or it's not like our code. This double pound symbol shows like a 2-level heading here. Under my heading R Markdown code chunks, I have some example text where saying that this is an R Markdown document. For some more information about these documents, you can see that there. And then in order to compile all the information within the R Markdown document, you can click the knit button. And let's just take a quick look of what the effect of putting those 2 pound symbols next to R Markdown and code chunks. Sometimes if you have like a half decent security on your web browser, it'll tell you, it'll show you this error of like opening the window. I just try again usually, and it pops up nicely. So you can see here at the top, that double pound symbol, R Markdown and code chunks, turned into this like large text heading, and it was saved into my table of contents. So just the point being, you can use these pound symbols, and you always want to have like a space after the pound symbol, otherwise it won't work properly for whatever reason, to create a heading. And so what I'm going to do is, and everyone can kind of try this in their documents, to create other level headings. So above it, I'm going to have a single pound symbol and say top level heading. And then I'm going to create a triple pound symbol and say lower level heading. And we can knit this document to see what it does. It's going to reopen the file I created. And we can see here that with the different numbers of hashtags or different number of pound symbols, we have larger text, top level heading, lower level heading, or mid-level heading and a lower level heading. And I think it goes all the way out to like 5 or 6 little pound symbols before it like stops creating subheadings. So in terms of like best practices for creating reports, if you're ever working with some folks who need screen readers, using these heading designations is really easy, and in terms of helping people navigate the documents if they need screen readers. Okay, so let's get into some code chunks. The biggest kind of advantage of using our Markdown documents is the fact that you can, like I said, create these headings, create text, and then include code within the text that will run and create the graphics that you're trying to do. And so in order to run chunks of code, you create what our Markdown calls code chunks. So I'm going to show you how to make a code chunk. Usually, when you kind of are making more and more code chunks, I tend to just like copy and paste a previous code chunk and delete the content within it. But I'm going to show everyone how to create a code chunk from the beginning. So there are these like little back tick marks, this back apostrophe. On my keyboard, it's to the left of the one, not the number one. You put 3 of those little tick marks, and then you put a curly bracket, a little curly symbol. The first thing that you need to do is you indicate what coding language is going to be in this code chunk. Our Markdown can handle a variety of coding languages. And then you are going to want to name the code chunk. So in this case, we have a code chunk here that's called name of chunk. I'm going to call this name of chunk 0. Okay. And then after the name of the code chunk, you can include a variety of options that kind of designate how our Markdown handles the code chunk. You can hide the code chunk so it can't be visible. You can show the code chunk. You can include warnings or not warnings. If you want to see what some of the options are for code chunks, there's a little gear that says that when you hover your mouse over it, it might be a little bit hard to see on my screen, but it will create this kind of little pop-up that says modify chunk options. If you click on that gear, you can see some of the options here. And we'll see how this kind of manifests as we we write and create some code. Okay, so that's how you open a code chunk, create some of the modifiers here. And then in order to close a code chunk, so right now we have an open code chunk. We see that there's kind of a gray goes all the way from this beginning of the code chunk through this other one. In order to close the code chunk, you add another 3 backticks. So Jiwon and Julia, do you want to talk a little bit more about the shortcuts?
LOL, I just saw Jiwon. Sorry, I inputted it twice.
No, you're good. You're good. I haven't used these shortcuts before, so I'd love to hear how you use it and what it does.
Yeah, the command option I just inputs the whole, the 3 first ticks, the R, and then the 3 last ticks, and then you can customize it in the same way afterwards if you so desire.
No way. So command option I. Oh, all right. That is a huge time saver. I've never done that before. Yeah, total game changer. Yikes. How did I not know this before? Okay, thank you for Julia and Jiwon for bringing that up. Super useful. So another thing that's very important is you can't have 2 code chunks with the same name in an R Markdown document. R Markdown doesn't like that for whatever reason. So sometimes you can get away with having like a code chunk with no name, but if you have multiple of the same names or multiple with no names, R Markdown won't compile properly by clicking the knit button. So in this one that I created with the shortcut, I'm going to say name of chunk. Cool. So we've seen how to create some code chunks. Now let's scroll through the R Markdown document really quickly just to see some of the code that we wrote in the last couple of sessions, what that looks like within an R Markdown document. So within, kind of before going into that code, I don't know, for me, it's on line 41. It's probably like a few lines up for some of you. I have some additional information about what some of the options look like. We can go over that in just a second. But at the beginning, similar to what I had mentioned before, it is kind of a best practice in code to load all of the libraries at the beginning when you first kind of set up your document. So almost always in my R Markdown documents, I have a code chunk as close to the top as possible. where I have all the library commands. I assume that I have all of the packages installed already. And if I don't, then I have to install the packages. But you can see here that in this code chunk, it will load all the packages that we need for the document. And like I said, for reports like this, it's best to install the necessary packages and load the libraries first. That way you don't run into any issues later on. So now I'm going to show you how to run a code chunk. So we have all this code. We can see the little ticks, open code chunk, close code chunk. We want to run all this together. We just want to, like, we don't want to go line by line. We don't have to highlight everything. We just want to run all together. There's this little green play button in the top right-hand corner of the code chunk. You can run the current chunk, and you'll see the green bar comes up along the side, and it'll just run everything. And you'll see it just ran. And if there's any errors or warnings or anything like that, it's going to come up on its own. Now, I keep closing that window. And let this again. So you'll notice that there was no, in the report that I created, there's no chunk showing all the libraries that we just loaded. And so what I've done with the settings there is hide the code chunk of all the libraries loaded, because let's say someone is reading through your report and maybe they don't need to know exactly like the libraries that you're reporting, but they do want to see all the code that you've written. That you can kind of like hide or show code chunks based on these settings. And so in this case, to hide the code from the actual report, I've typed in include equals false, and to hide warnings, because I know that sometimes when you load packages, it gives me a warning that doesn't really influence the overall running of the code. I have warning equals false. Okay, so here's our code loading all the libraries. Go ahead and run that code chunk in your document just to make sure that if you're running subsequent code, all the libraries are already loaded. Does anyone have questions? Yeah, instead of saying warnings, so we have a question. Instead of saying warnings equals false, could you just turn warnings off in the settings for that code chunk? So if we go on settings and we say, show warnings, show messages. So it adds like an additional kind of line of code here. Warning equals true. If I flip it the other way, it says warning equals false. So that is, I think, the way that it would designate including or not including the warnings. So it's essentially the same like bit of code here. Yeah, so that's a good point. Someone's getting an error load namespace name. There's not a package called knitter. So I did not install this, and I should have or load this library, but we need to load the library knitter in order for all of the features of our Markdown to work. So library. So if you have it installed already, go ahead and load that library. If it's not installed, then run your install.packages knitter. So once all the libraries are installed, throw up a thumbs up and we can move forward. Cool. Give it another few seconds. It should be knit with an R at the end, not knits. And if that's not the problem, then you might need to install the package by doing install.packages. Install.packages, knitter, I have to put that in quotations. So one of the more packages to be updated or currently. So I already have it installed, so it's gonna like ask me to update it. But you can just install that package and then run the library. If you're working in RStudio Cloud, I don't think it'll give you any issues if you're running this code. I can double check in my desktop instance as well, if it's helpful. Okay, while there's still some troubleshooting going on, maybe Julia or Juwan, you can DM Alyssa and iron out if there's any additional issues. I'm gonna just really quickly go over all of the code that we wrote over the course of the last two sessions. So in the last two sessions, we did a handful of things. We started by getting familiar with the RStudio environment. We talked about our source files and our Markdown in the top left-hand corner, the global environment, the files navigator and the plots navigator, and the console itself. After doing that, we talked about importing data. And so in this code chunk, data import, we would basically run all of the steps of importing data as we did in the previous days. You can go ahead and push that play button and run that code chunk. It should create the objects in the global environment if they aren't there already. The next thing that we did was we covered data wrangling and cleaning. We merged two tables together using the left join command, and we looked into the documentation for merge and join. We also learned how to use pipes and dplyr. You can see here that we calculated new columns and filtered the data. We did some selection of columns in this way, and we can run that as well. Pull up those bits of code. Ooh, sorry to hear about the fatal error in R, Jamie. Sometimes you just have to restart your R session and keep on pushing forward. It happened yesterday, actually, to somebody. So you can run this code chunk. Also, if you, for example, run into a fatal error and you need to like quickly catch up, you can run all of the code chunks above the code chunk that we are on by clicking this little, there's like a downward button with like a green bar. If you click on this button, it'll run all code chunks above. So let's say, for example, I cleared out everything in my global environment. Suddenly now my global environment is completely empty and I have to start basically completely back over. If I push this little downward button to the bar with a bar, it'll run everything and create all those objects. Thanks, Jamie. Keep on trying. It's hard to say what's going on right now. Are you in a local instance of RStudio, or are you in the cloud? Local, got it. Yeah, okay. Maybe try to make sure all the packages are installed and or updated. But hopefully, worst case scenario, you can migrate into the cloud and carry on with the activities in a little bit. All right, and then the next thing that we did was we visualized some data trends using Ggplot. And this is just the code that we ran before. I must have a typo, infection growth. Oh, I never ran this chunk. Okay, so run all the chunks and all the things will work. And when you run a code chunk that includes a plotting command, the plot will generally appear right below the code chunk. And likewise, we can do facet wrapping. So this is the other plot that we created here. And then finally, the violin plots that we were working on as well. And you can see here for each of these code chunks, we have an open and a close and some settings around that code chunk. And of course, the last thing that we did was some basic statistic testing like t-tests. And then we can run this code chunk as well. And you can see here, similar to the plots that were created before, the text for the result of the t-test appears below this chunk here. And so if all of the code chunks don't end up having errors and everything works, you can click the knit button and it will go through the entire document, running all the lines of code and compiling everything together. And you can see how it all lays out. We can show all the code chunks that we went over. We can see the plots that were created, some of the warning messages that appear, and so on. Okay, so that is my kind of 10,000 foot overview of Markdown, of our Markdown documents. Jiwon or Julia, do you have kind of any additional tips or tricks working in our Markdown documents before to share before we take a quick break and then go into the breakout sessions, which I'll explain when we come back?
I think you covered most of the perspectives. I don't have more to share.
Cool.
Yeah, me neither. Ready for a break.
Cool. We have one last question come up. It was a DM to you. So what line of code did I run to make my ENV pop up? So so in order to kind of like compile the document and create that like pop up report, I just push this little knit button. If I click the knit button, it'll run all of the code together. I hope that answers the question. And then it'll create this report like this. So if everyone could just give it a shot to see if their documents knit and create this HTML report, go ahead and give it a shot and throw up a thumbs up if it works. And if it's not working, throw up your shocked expression, and then just so that I know. And I'll tell you now that it might not be working because if you've written like notes or if you put something into a code chunk that leads to like the code in the code chunk not working, it won't create that document. So basically you need to have no errors in your code in order for the document to knit together. So if the document fails to knit, you're going to want to double check to make sure that all of the code is working. And the best way to kind of double check to see if it's working under the R Markdown kind of section here, it goes chunk by chunk, telling you like what percentage of the compilation is done, and it'll tell you like under label here the title of the code chunk, and it'll tell you like where the compilation failed if it fails. So that's one way that you can find where the code chunk fails. The other way is by running individual chunks. And if you see any like red bar come up or like red thing come up, you'll know that there's a like that's the line where your error occurs. Okay, so I'm gonna before we go into the break, I'm gonna really quickly talk about the activity, and then I'll kind of review the instructions for the activity again when we come back. But essentially, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go to breakout sessions, and what you're going to do is under the challenge heading, this little double hashtag challenge heading. What you're going to do is you're going to add some code here from of like a plot of your own plot from the data that we were working with before. You know, we created our smooth line plot. We created a violin plot. There's a whole bunch of different geometries in the Ggplot cheat sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to take either this data or the MMR vaccine rate data that we loaded and create a new visualization. You can copy and paste the code from previous chunks and modify some things, modify the colors, add some headings, change the titles, do whatever you want, but get a little bit of like, you know, your hands dirty, either manipulating plots that already exist or creating some new plots within your group. So with that, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to do another quick review of the Ggplot cheat sheet, and we can maybe write out one plot and then launch everyone into the breakout sessions. If that sounds good, throw up a thumbs up, and we can regroup at 9:55. Okay. Cool. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Let's regroup at 9:55. I'm here for another 2-3 minutes to answer any questions while everyone else is on break, and then I'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll get started again around that.
In the recording, go back to sharing. All right, so as people are still trickling in, okay, make sure I can see all my windows. Cool. Okay, so the instructions for the activity. So what we're going to do is I'm going to divide up everyone into like 3 or 4 breakout rooms, just so that there's about like 5 or 6 people per room. And we're going to have basically each group create a data visualization. So I want you all to work together to create one or more, or just at least troubleshoot one data visualization to just get your hands dirty with some of this code and produce a plot either similar or different than the plots that we have created over the course of the session. I'm going to give, basically, I think I'm going to give everyone like 30 minutes for the first kind of send out for the breakout session. And I think for the first like 5 to 10 minutes or so, if everyone could just do like a quick round of like, this is who I am, this is the lab that I'm working in, or this is like a project that I'm interested in. And like just a quick round of intros, and then talk about the data visualization that you're interested in creating. So you should be done with intros and data visualization brainstorming about 10 minutes in, and then start working for the next 20 minutes. G1, Julia and I will be kind of going around from room to room, making sure that everyone's kind of staying up on top of things, either on task or at least kind of making some progress with the work that they're doing. If there are questions that come up or troubleshooting for the work that they have to do, you can let one of the helpers know. After we get put into breakout sessions, there's an option to ask for help. There's like a raise hand, ask for help button. If you need help, feel free to click that ask for help button, and one of the helpers will make it to that session. So Okay, so I'm gonna do like a quick poll. If people are ready to create their own data visualizations, throw up a thumbs up. If you would rather I do like a quick review of at least one of the plotting functions, just as a quick reminder of how the plotting functions work, throw up that shocked expression, and then we can go into the breakout sessions. All right, we got about a 50-50 split on that. So I'm going to just do another review of a Ggplot function before we go into the breakout sessions. But I appreciate the motivation that others have. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick review of two plots, the Geom Smooth one and then the violin plot that we have. So if you scroll to on my R Markdown documents around line 133, it might be something different, but if you look at the code chunk name CPM growth, I forgot to change the name from, so it should be case density growth, but it's in the code chunk called CPM growth. So what we did in our previous session is that we used the filter function to filter on rows under the population where we had a county population of greater than 1 million residents. So this is 110,000 residents. So sorry if the math is a little confusing there. After we did this infection growth filtering step, we created a case density plot. So it's a plot of the case density in large counties. So this is the number of cases per 10,000 residents. So the way that the Ggplot function is written is that we have our assignment operator, this little arrow that's pointing to the left, creating an object called case density plot. And then we open the Ggplot function by typing in Ggplot and open parentheses. And remember, in the grammar of graphics, there's three essential components that inform the data set. First, the data set itself, which in this case is infection growth. The aesthetics, or the kind of pieces that inform the coordinate system. So here's our aesthetics. We list off an x variable, so an x equals here, a y variable, y equals case density. You don't need to have the x or y there, but sometimes it's helpful to have there just so that you kind of stay oriented. And then you can either designate the color or fill based on a variable. In this case, we are basing it on county. So once you have kind of that backbone, the data set, and the aesthetics that inform the coordinate system, you can add geometries. In this case, it's going to be a smooth line that creates that actual like line on the plot, or the shape on the plot that is used for plotting. In this case, we went over Geom Smooth, which requires one component for customization, which you have to tell it the method to use for plotting the line. In this case, I use auto, and then we add a modifier to the labels, the x-axis, the y-axis, and the title in this way. So if we want to run this whole thing, I'm just going to scroll up and click this play button, and it's going to run the plot. We can see it below here. Now, if I were to say like, okay, I want this to be like a straight line and not like this kind of curved line, I can kind of modulate the method that's used. I happen to know that some of the options, what some of the options are. You can look in the help section or on the Ggplot cheat sheet to look at some of the other options. But if we use the LM function, it's going to look slightly differently. It does a best guess to create like a y equals mx plus b kind of line, a straight line based on the data set that we have. But as you can imagine, using auto, we'll use the kind of like a best guess method for that line plotting here. We talked about facet wrapping, which separates out all the plots. That is modulated with this facet wrap kind of modifier here, added with the plus symbol. And then in our last example, we filtered on the most recent month of new infections, new confirmed cases for the most populous counties. And we have added a few more components to the plot. In this case, again, for those three major components, we have our data set, the aesthetics. In this case, again, X is assumed to be listed first, but sometimes it is helpful to write X equals Y equals. For violin plots, since it's filling in the shape of the violin, we're determining that the color or the fill is going to be based on this county information. And plus, geom violin is the geometry that we're using, and we've modified it in a few ways. The scale fill brewer modifies the fill using the R color brewer package. In this case, we're using a blue color palette. We're using the stat summary function in order to create the error bars. So for the most part, for the error bars, you can kind of copy and paste this chunk right here if you want to add it to the plots that you're creating. And then we have some labels here. This line, which I added here, removes those little text headers like we did in the violin chunk here. So we can see that that we have our error bars, we have the kind of different violin shapes. We've removed the names of the different counties from below the plot. That's this line of code here. And that's kind of like a quick rundown of the violin plot and the line plot that we created before. So I'm gonna maybe quickly talk about the Ggplot cheat sheet, which I actually think I have loaded already. So for when you're creating your own plot, you can just take a look around at these different variables and try to identify based on kind of what you're trying to kind of plot or envision, what geometry would be best for the thing that you're trying to visualize. And in the examples in the Ggplot cheat sheet, you can see what are like kind of the required components in order for the code to work by seeing the example that they have. So if there's anything in the parentheses in the example, then you know that something needs to be written there. In the case of geom.plot, for example, bin axis, so the axis that bins the dots needs to be designated as X or Y, in this case Y, and then you tell it a stack direction. So how do you stack the dots properly? In this case, we were using geom violin, and it asked for the scale information here. So feel free to take a little bit of time exploring the geometries and use the R Markdown environment to create a new plot. Do we have any questions, thoughts, comments based on what I just kind of reviewed? So getting the cheat sheet for the desktop, I generally just like go to like whatever search engine that I'm using, and I search for the RStudio cheat sheets for data visualization and look it up. You have to download it from online. You can't like find it within the RStudio environment, but you can very easily search them, like Ggplot to cheat sheet R. And it almost always is like one of the first things that pops up. So Kevin asked a good question. Do you want us to use the same data set? You are welcome to use the same data set. I will not require people to use the data sets that I've provided. I just for like ease of troubleshooting, it's easiest for me to help you troubleshoot if you're using like a data set that I'm familiar with, like the county COVID data, or in this case, also we uploaded an MMR vaccine rate data. So data set. So you can use this data set as well, the MMR vaccine rate data. And if you want to look for additional information about those data sets, let me see if I could find. I'll have to share a link with everyone in chat in a moment. Oh my goodness, I can't control my window here. This should probably work. Nope. Sorry, folks. I'm gonna need to share a link to the MMR vaccine rate data for the information about the different variables in there. But you can always take a look at the data set that we opened. So the MMR vaccine rate, once you've uploaded it, you can take a look at the data table and see that within the MMR vaccine rate data table, you have vaccine rates for different schools in various states, cities, counties, and so on. And you can see the percentage of folks that have been vaccinated and the location of the school and the year that the data was collected. Okay, so with that, unless there's any additional questions, I'm gonna open up the breakout sessions. The helpers and I will be in and around the different groups to help out and answer any questions about the activity. So give me just a second. I need to give some permissions. I'm gonna make G1 a co-host. And Julia a co-host. And breakout rooms. So I'm gonna create 5 breakout rooms. So there's gonna be about 5 people per room. And we're gonna close the breakout rooms after 30 minutes, but the helpers and I will be around to help out. Okay, open all rooms. All right, so go ahead and jump into your breakout room, introduce yourselves, and get started on the activity. So Jared is going to tell us about his group's work in the breakout session.
I don't know why I got kind of weirdly distorted here. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know why, I don't know why I did that. But basically, we used one of the data sets that we worked with and created yesterday. We used infection growth, or last month infections, to basically chart out the confirmed new daily cases from December 21st to January 21st. So you'll see that I've got the code up here too. It's right here. Sorry, it's right here. So we're able to take a look at all of the different counties that were included in that data set. We've set it to scale with the Y, so we don't have any like kind of wonky looking graphs here. We also angled the x-axes so that, you know, it wasn't just like all overlapping over each other, and we've retitled both of the axes and gave the chart itself a title. So we built off of a couple of the different kind of chunks of code that we worked with yesterday, but I think we were able to come up with something pretty interesting, and just at least able to get a good look at the different shapes that the cases have kind of taken over the last month or so. So that was kind of where we were coming from.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. So does anyone from one of the groups that was working with the MMR data. Would you be willing or comfortable sharing some of the stuff that y'all were thinking about or working on over the course of the breakout room? I know that there were 2 groups working with the MMR data.
Yeah, I guess I could share. Just give me a second. And then my other group member also has a cool graph that he can show too. But it still needs a lot of cleaning and work. But I guess we would just want to look at the different MMR rates by state. So we just consolidated this data. Like this axis is very messy, but it's just a general idea, and we can see that like there's slight fluctuations in different states. Yeah, that's what I got. And then I think my other group member also.
Right on. Jared, if you want to copy that line, or somebody from that group want to copy the line to get the angle of the text rotated, that might help Kevin out.
Okay. Yeah, I think Daniel also had a graph for my group.
Cool. Daniel, would you like to share?
Sure. I can share my screen. So some of the problems that I had when working with this data was that, so I was trying to do what Kevin was doing, but I guess when I was trying to do the state, like I had this as state, there's like 60,000 different plots, so I couldn't come up with the plot. So then I decided to look at types of centers. So like whether it's a charter, kindergarten, and yeah, I did this violin plot, and so it still needs a lot of work, but yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for sharing. It seems like charter schools have a little lower vaccination rates there. Right on. Yeah, definitely. Kind of working with massaging those data sets is one of the kind of like essential components of figuring out like how to get your good data visualization. So cool. Thank you everyone for sharing. Do we have any last volunteer for sharing what they were working on? No last volunteers. All right. So great job, everyone. We made it to more or less the end of the session. For everyone who's taking this course for credit, stick around. I have some additional stuff for you, starting with a quiz to wrap up the session, and then a homework assignment required for everyone. The homework assignment is going to be due, so quiz is going to be due by the end of the week, so Friday, and the homework assignment is due Monday, so you have some time over the weekend to work on it. For everyone else who's not taking this course for credit, thank you so much for attending. An email is going to get sent out to everyone who registered for the course for feedback. Feedback from you all about the workshop is how we improve the workshop, how we add new content. If there was something that was missing that you wanted for it to be shared, if there was something about the pace that was maybe it was too slow, maybe it was too fast. Any feedback that you have is really, really helpful for us in optimizing our workshops and making it as good of an experience as possible. So if you see the email for that, it's going to be going out probably exactly at noon today. If you see the email, please respond to that survey. With that announcement, feel free so if you stick around and want to do the assignment, it is an exercise that can be useful for you to check to see your skills, if you kind of understand the stuff that we talked about. I did design the quiz and assignment to be relatively easy to get a high grade, just because it's COVID times, things are stressful for everybody. I don't want y'all stressing out about this class. It's hard enough to learn R as it is, but you're totally welcome to take it, and I can give you your score if you want. So what I'm going to do is right now, I'm going to drop a link to the quiz into the chat, and people can start working on that. Actually, I'll give you the instructions to the assignment first, and then I'll drop a link into the quiz, and I'll stick around. If people want to work on the quiz in the session, they're welcome to, and ask any questions about the quiz. all of the assignment, the quiz, everything is completely open note. Look through any of the materials that we talked about, use Google, like whatever, get the answers that you need for the quiz. Okay, so for the assignment, I'm gonna quickly just share my screen and talk about it. 1 second, got into our Studio Cloud. Jared, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send out the quiz in the chat here, and then for the homework instructions, they're already actually written into the document, and I'll send out. I can add you to the rubric email to see how the scoring is done. Sorry, my RStudio Cloud is taking forever to load. Okay, so can folks see my RStudio Cloud? Give me like a thumbs up or a nod. I can't. Yeah, I think it should be good. Okay, cool. Okay, so at the bottom of the part 2 document, we have instructions for the homework assignment for the students and the various courses associated with this workshop. The assignment is to create a new code chunk below, name it quiz chunk, and then create a new plot with the code chunk, similar to the activity that we did in class, but create a new plot. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Create a new plot. You can modify certain components of the plots that we had already created before by copy and pasting and then modifying, or create a completely new data visualization using whatever data sets that you want to work with. So it's very much reproducing the activity that we had in our breakout session, but now you're going to be completely on your own, and you can kind of troubleshoot in whatever ways possible. I really, really encourage everyone to be creative, make mistakes. In order to get full credit for the assignment, the homework technically is pass fail. And so all you have to do is turn in the item. And the way that, that I would like people to submit their work is if you can email me the part 2, you can save your part 2 document, save it as like part 2 with your initials afterwards. So the way that I would do that would be save as. You see part 2.rmd, I would just put a little underscore here, IA, and that's what I would send to me for grading. I'm going to send a separate email with a rubric as to how to get the most number of points. But again, do your own filtering step, add a new plot that we haven't created before, and you can get full credit for the assignment. Okay, so that's the homework. As I said, I'll share the email with the rubric as soon as we're done with this session. So with regards to the quiz, okay, so a document, so question, do I have a document of notes that outlines this workshop? Tried writing notes while learning both, okay. I don't have like a Cliff Notes version of this workshop, but what I tried really, really hard to do is include all of the stuff that I said as notes, as those little # hashtag notes in the part 1 file. The explanations for all the different code pieces, arguments should all be there. 1 second. How do we access this code, or do we not need to add onto? So save the code into your R Markdown file and send your R Markdown file to me. That's how you could turn in the homework assignment. Okay, so I'm going to send the quiz now. I'm going to send a link. Actually, 1 second. I need to add one more field here, collecting names and email addresses. Okay. So quiz is ready. Copy link and pasting. All right, so the quiz is in the chat. Let me know if you have any access issues. Sometimes from time to time, that does happen. If you got the quiz, you're good to go. Throw up a thumbs up. Let me know. Okay, so yeah, also the way that the grading is going to work is whatever you score like the highest on, be it the quiz or the homework. Oh, okay, we have some permissions issues. Whatever you score higher on the quiz or the homework, I'll give you the higher grade that you get. Let me make sure that my settings allow for people, for y'all to. All right, try this new link and see if there's still permission issues, Kevin and Amanda. Yeah, if you want to just take the quiz to test your knowledge, you're 100% welcome to just take it and see what's up. I'll send, with the name and email address things, I'll know who to send the grades to. If it doesn't, I should give you your grade at the end of the quiz. I'm not exactly sure how these Google Forms work, but. I appreciate the positive vibes for everyone saying thank you. Y'all are great. Please fill out the form if you have positive feedback. I like to see positive feedback too if it's a good course. Once you have the quiz, you don't need to wait up. If you feel good to go, want to move forward, go ahead and sign off of the meeting and work on the quiz on your own. Email me if you have any questions, comments, thoughts. All right, I'm going to send the email with the assignment. Right on. Take care, Jarrett. If you want me to actually email me if you want me to send you the rubric for the homework if you want to see like how it's graded. But I know since you're not taking this for credit, no pressure.
Yep, will do. I'll probably work on it more like in my own time type of thing, but I know that I'll be playing around more in the data set. And then for that, for my community data description class, we're working with the data actively right now. So I'll probably ask you a question about that rather than these data sets.
Totally. Right on.
Perfect.
Good luck. Take care.
Thanks again.
Spiridon, did you have any last bits of questions that you wanted for clarification with regard to the code that we were emailing about?
No, I'm good on that.
Okay.
But yeah, actually, I don't know. We were trying to in our group. It's kind of bothering me. Do that same thing, MMR vaccination by state.
Mm-hmm.
But then we wanted to look at just public schools and then plot by state for vaccination rate. But it looked like the graph was basically adding up just like total MMR. So our resulting chart was really weird along the y-axis.
Yeah, so it was like a sum of all the probably times it, like the state was mentioned or something like that instead of.
Yeah. So how would you, so you'd have to create a new column that was the average for each state, right?
Yeah, in my experience, that's how I've done it before. Do you want to share your screen and maybe we can kind of talk it through with the helpers here?
Yeah.
Maybe Julia and Giovanni, you can take this question. I'm gonna step away from the screen for like 2 minutes just to do a little quick stretch and bio break, and then I'll be right back.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, if you just want to talk us through what you did and we'll follow along.
Yeah, so, well, initially this was what we did. So we just created a new data frame that had filtered by public, and then tried plotting that like this. And like I was saying, the plot that we got was, oh, that wasn't there.
I think it's just because you have an extra, yeah, that right there.
So like, yeah, I was taking this sum, but we wanted average by state. So then what would be the easiest to make a new column that lists the average grouped by states?
So first I want to be sure, what's the MMR column like represent?
That was based on whatever that metadata he sent us about this file, but it represents, I guess, the vaccination rate. So 100% to whatever percent of the population is vaccinated.
Okay.
So then, yeah, I assume we need to create a separate column in this data frame that lists the average by the state or by it from this data frame.
Yes, and instead of just creating a new column, you could actually like create a whole new data frame that would just have the states in one column and then the average MMR vaccination rate in another column. Because then that would just be the easiest to work with and plot.
Okay.
So that would be in your filtering step. So yeah, you could filter by public, and then you could also group by in another row. You could do the pipe symbol. And I think, and what do you think we want to group it by?
State, but
yes, that's what I was thinking.
So need to be in quotations.
I think it's good just like that. And then we could do another pipe symbol. And the command summarize. And then parentheses. And you can write out the new column name that you want. So maybe like perfect. And then equals. And then whatever you think would go here. And the command for mean is just mean.
Mean dot or mean parentheses?
Mean parentheses, yep. Yeah, so maybe let's run that and see our new table, what it's looking like. Cool.
Nice. So then, yeah, that should work.
Yeah, what I find is that like you can never really make a, like it's hard to make a visualization with your full data frame. You normally need to do some pretty extensive cleaning.
So the group by state part of this pipe just tells it that we want to apply the next function to this, that subgroup that we're grouping by.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. That answers it.
Cool. Yeah, and you could add the tilting your axes labels if you want to, so they're not overlapping. I can send you that little thing.
Yeah, I was gonna just add this one here. Just remove that.
Perfect, yeah. And then if you want them like filled versus outlined, you could change the color to be fill.
Here?
Nope. Yeah, so instead of color equals state, you could do fill equals state. And then don't forget your plus sign. Yeah. I think you're just missing another parentheses at the end of theme.
Yep. Much better. Awesome.
Dope. Yay.
Thanks a lot, Julia.
You're welcome.
All right, you guys have a nice afternoon.
You too.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So Julia and Jiwon, one of the things that I've been meaning to ask is, especially since the collaboratory kind of requires me to be like the main instructor, I was wondering what, in terms of an experience, this is as a helper, like how do you feel like this is as a use of your time? Like I don't want to, like I know I teach this quarterly and I ask for data science center help every quarter. Like I know that's like there are times when like the helper it doesn't always feel like there's like a lot of stuff to do. So I was wondering, just from your experience, like, you know, I know G1, you've come back and helped a bunch of times, so I really appreciate it. But like, how do you feel of it as a use of your time?
Oh, I think it's pretty okay and pretty good. And also each time I learn something too, to refresh my coding skills, you know, because I haven't used R for a while. So each time it's for me to refresh.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, this like goes hand in hand kind of with like what I've been learning in school, and it was nice to like get questions in the DMs that I could like answer directly. And it was also good to like go over Ggplot in R because I don't do a lot of visualization in R. So yeah, I had fun. I enjoyed this.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't like totally sure, and I know that like this is like teaching this for me is a huge chunk of time, but I'm also talking for like most of the time, so it goes by fast for me. But I could see if you're not getting a lot of questions, but I also don't see the questions that you're getting sometimes if they're DMs. So I just want to say again, thank you both so much for your help. This has been super helpful. It's really, really hard to teach these art workshops with 50 people without any help. So I couldn't do this without you all. And until next time.
Yeah, of course.
Yay, thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.